Ms. Albert, you testified that Jennifer McCabe woke you up around 6:45 a.m., correct?
I believe I said between 6 and 6:30, but could have been, yes,
She obviously had access to the house.
yes.
The door wasn't locked.
Nope.
That's sort of a typical practice for you.
Yeah, it was just sometimes with the kids, the last one in, supposed to lock it, they didn't. It just wasn't always locked.
And inside your house, you've had plenty of blankets.
So as to that form, I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask the question a different way, Ms. Little.
Objection.
I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask a shorter form of that question.
Yes,
You were also lying next to a first responder.
Objection.
That
yes.
Neither you nor your husband came outside to help Johnny.
We did not go outside because we had no idea what was going on outside. We were sound asleep until my sister came into my bedroom.
Lally?
Thank you, Your Honor.
With regard to phone calls from your sister Jennifer McCabe that morning, shortly after 6 a.m., did those phone calls wake you up?
No,
Did you answer those phone calls?
no,
Did you speak to Jennifer McCabe on the phone prior to her, or at any point on that morning prior to her coming into your room?
I did not.
You were shown something that's a Cellbrite extraction report, correct?
Yes,
Not just that specific one, but have you ever seen any Cellbrite extraction report before in your life?
no,
So fair to say you don't know how to interpret the data that's on there?
no,
Fair to say that you don't know whether or not an answered call or something that's listed as answered was something that was actually answered or went to voicemail.
correct.
With regard to your dog, Chloe, following that incident in May of 22, what, if anything, did you and your husband do with regard to the person that had been bitten?
We had gone over to their house to apologize for what had happened and offered to pay any bills that they may have had for any injury to the dog or anything. Then after that, we just decided that we thought the best thing to do would be to try to rehome it because I just didn't want something like that to happen again.
To the jury, sort of what are the steps that you took in the process of?
Initially, I had called a bunch of shelters and they were pretty much telling me that it would be hard to rehome her if she was dog aggressive and they would probably have to put her down. I didn't want to do that. The family, we love the dog. So I did not want to do that. So I reached out to the woman in Texas who we got the dog from to see if she could help. She said she couldn't take it back, but she would try to help me out. So she ended up finding a woman who lived in Vermont. I think she lived alone. She had big property. It seemed like a good fit. She wanted to take Chloe and we made arrangements and I went and met this woman halfway and I gave her Chloe.
What, if any, conversations or contact that you had with that woman in Vermont rehoming?
For a few months after
So not the substance of it, but
You had contact.
yes, I did for a few months, back and forth.
Now, with reference to Chloe, when your sister Jennifer McCabe comes into your bedroom hysterical that morning, January 29th, was Chloe in the room at the time?
Yes,
You were asked some questions about the evening or the early morning when people had come from the waterfall back to your home, correct? At some point, you were cleaning and Mr. Higgins and your husband were out of your line of sight, is that correct?
yes.
How long a period of time were we talking?
I don't, wasn't very long, a couple minutes. Wasn't watching where everybody was and what everybody was doing.
Relatively short period of time.
Yes.
so you need to take this down, sir. Thank you. There was something that was just up there. Go ahead.
Ms. Albert, you never received any voicemails from Jennifer McCabe on January 29th, did you?
Not that
You also have never produced, pursuant to our request, any documentation about the whereabouts of Chloe.
The objection sustained. I'm going to strike that question. Disregard the question. Well, questions aren't evidence, so we can leave it on the record, but the objection sustained.
You've never turned over any information about the location of Chloe. Since the pending information about the whereabouts of Chloe, you have.
believe so.
When did you do that? No further questions.
All right, Ms. Albert, you are all set.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon to the jury.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Brian, last name Albert, Albert.
Where do you live, sir?
I live in Norwood, Massachusetts.
How long have you lived in Norwood?
Approximately a year.
Who, if anyone, you live in?
My wife, Nicole, and my son, Brian, and my son, Brendan.
Actually, just a little bit about your family as far as, let me start with yourself and your wife, Nicole. How long have the two of you been married?
Approximately 29 years.
Were you you together for a period of time prior to getting married?
Yes, we've known each other since we were 13, 14 years old.
Do you have any siblings, sir?
I do.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 5 brothers and 1 sister.
If you could, just as far as, are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest of 7, yes.
As far as your brothers and sisters are concerned, what are their names? And if you could rank them sort of by.
Sure. The next sibling after me is my sister Kathleen. Then I have a brother Chris, a brother Kevin, a brother Keith, a brother Brendan, and a brother Timmy.
Nicole, do you have,
Yes,
how many children do you have?
5.
How old are they?
So my oldest daughter is 29. My son Brian is 25. My son Brendan turns 23 today. And I have twins, or we have twins that are 20 years old. Caitlin's 28. I'm sorry, I said 29.
Prior to living at your address in Norwood,
Canton, Mass.
and how long have you lived in?
Approximately in the house on Fairview Road, approximately 11 years.
In total, about how long have you before moving?
Approximately 45 years.
And that's 34 Fairview Road, is that right?
Yes.
What, if any, relationship did that home or that residence have to your family before you and your wife?
My parents had lived at that residence prior to us.
So you had spent some of your childhood in that house as well?
Yes.
Do you work, sir?
I retired now. Retired.
What did you retire?
Boston Police Department.
How long were you a member of the Boston?
Approximately 30 years.
Within the Boston Police Department, were you assigned to any sort of specific unit or special duties?
My last assignment, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. My last assignment was the Boston Police Fugitive Unit.
Sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28, 2022. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall what day of the week that was?
The 28th, I believe, was a Friday.
And when you first got up on the 28th, where were you at that?
On the 28th, I was in New York City.
Why had you gone to New York?
So I went to New York for a funeral of a New York City police officer who was killed in the line of duty.
About what time or what day did you go down to?
We went down the day before, so I believe that was Thursday.
Do you recall how it was that you got down there?
Yes, I flew to New York.
When you say we, who, if anyone, went with you on that trip?
I flew with a friend and a coworker named Eddie Hernandez.
So another Boston police officer?
Yes.
Down in New York at that funeral, were there other members of law enforcement that you knew were?
Yes, there were thousands of police officers that went to the funeral.
And included within those people, you mentioned you have a brother Kevin, is that correct?
Yes,
Is he a police officer as well?
he is.
Where is he?
He's a detective in Canton, Massachusetts.
Was he down at this funeral as well?
He was.
Do you know a gentleman by the name of Brian Higgins?
Yes.
Was Brian Higgins at this funeral service?
Yes, he was.
How is it that you know Brian?
So I know Brian Higgins initially from work, professional relationship. I've known him known of him for 10 or 15 years. And the past few years, more recently, we worked together on a closer basis and I became better friends with him.
Fair to say that when you became better friends with Lally.
Yes.
As far as your return trip from New York, what, if anything, happened?
On the return trip from New York, we drove back.
Why did you drive versus fly back?
So that weekend, there was anticipated snowstorm. I believe the flight that we were taking with JetBlue may have even been canceled. And Brian Higgins was leaving in a vehicle that morning. So we ended up driving, or after the funeral, we ended up driving with him.
So it's yourself, Mr. Higgins, and then who, if anyone else?
Eddie Hernandez and my brother Kevin.
When you arrived back in Massachusetts, where was this that you went?
I initially went to the Charlestown to pick up my vehicle.
Where was your vehicle?
It was at a police station, Charlestown Station. It's a satellite station located in Charlestown.
And that was in reference to the airport, is that correct?
Yes,
So that would have been Logan that you flew out of? And then
airport, yes.
after you were dropped off with your vehicle, what kind of vehicle was that?
That was a Ford Edge
Was that a vehicle?
work vehicle.
So you get dropped back off at your work vehicle, where did you go?
From Charlestown, I drove back towards the Canton area and I met Brian Higgins at a restaurant bar called the Hillside.
Canton as well?
I believe so. It's on the Canton-Milton line. I believe it sits in Canton.
And what was the purpose of you and Mr. Higgins?
After the drive home, he asked if I wanted to get some food and stop off. I said yes.
If you know about what time was it that you got to?
I want to say around 9:30, perhaps. Not entirely sure.
When you arrived there, what did you?
So we went into the establishment and had a drink and hung out for a while.
Did you order anything?
I did not. I believe Brian did, though.
While you were at the Hillsides with Mr. Higgins, what, if any, communication did you receive from your wife, Nicole?
So I talked to my wife, I think more than once, and she had let me know that her and a few people were at another location in Canton. And she had asked if I wanted to to come by and see them.
What was that other,
That other location was the waterfall.
is that an establishment you were familiar with?
Yes,
You've been there before several times?
I had been there before, yes.
So you drove then from the hillside to the waterfall?
Yes.
About how long a drive is that?
Maybe 7 minutes, between less than 10 minutes.
So as you're going on that drive, the snow that was anticipated coming in, had that, anything related to that started yet?
No, I at that time, I don't recall any snow.
In relation to the waterfall, where did you park?
In the parking lot for the waterfall, which is adjacent to the door to go inside. So it's to the left if you're looking at the building from Washington Street.
When you come into, now, when you left the hillside, Mr. Higgins stayed there?
Yes, he stayed.
When you came into the waterfall, who, if anyone, was there?
So when I walked in, I saw my wife, my oldest daughter, Caitlin. I saw my brother, Chris, his wife, Julie, my brother-in-law, Matt, and my sister-in-law, Jen.
Your brother-in-law, Matt, and your sister-in-law, Jen, their last name is McCabe, is that right?
Yes.
If you could just explain to the jury sort of how related as far as where it is that you are.
My brother, Chris's wife is Julie, and then Nicole's sister is Jen, and Jen's husband is Matt McCabe.
Is it fair to say that you've probably known Jennifer McCabe about as long as you've known?
Yes, since she was a little kid, maybe 6, 7 years old.
You see these people, and where are they situated in the water?
There was a high top table in the front area as you walk in the middle of the room, and everybody was just around the high top table.
What, if anything, was there as far as live entertainment?
There was a band playing there.
With reference to the people that you've just spoken, as far as your wife and your daughter specifically, were they at the high top table closer to the band or further away?
They were on the side of the table that's closer to the door as you come in, and then there were other people on the opposite side of the table that was closer to the bar area.
After you came into the waterfall, went up to your family, what did you order? Anything? What did you do?
Yeah, I just said hi to everybody. I don't recall exactly, but I'm sure I ordered a drink and then just hung out with family and friends.
Following your arrival, showed up in a event.
There was another couple at the table. I don't know if they were there initially when I walked in, but there was another couple at the table whom I believed were there before I got there, but I just don't know what their names were.
Do you know how they were?
I don't. I think they're friends with Jen and Matt, but I'm not 100% sure.
Where were they situated in reference to where your wife and your daughter were?
So they were, I believe, to the right of this pretty large high top table. Yes.
If you recall, what were you drinking that night?
I don't recall. I usually drink beer, Mick Ultra, but I can't remember that night what I was drinking.
Following your arrival, family eventually showed up at this establishment in Georgia.
Yes.
Who were they, sir?
After I was there, maybe about a half hour, Brian Higgins arrived at the location.
If you recall, what, if any, sort of communication did you have with Mr. Higgins, or how did Mr. Higgins know to come to the waterfall specifically?
Because while we were at the hillside, I had mentioned that I was going to be leaving to go to the waterfall to see my family who was already there. I invited him to come by if he wanted to.
At any point in time, sort of throughout the course of the day, yourself and Mr. Higgins, you had each other's sort of information and cell numbers, things like that.
Yes.
At any point in time throughout the course of the day or the evening, did you have occasion to text or phone call or anything with Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
After Mr. Higgins arrived, who, if anyone else, came into the waterfall and joined you?
Probably after about a half hour later from Brian Higgins arriving, John O'Keefe came into the waterfall with the defendant.
That would have been probably about 11.
Yes.
John O'Keefe, if you could tell the jury, did you know John O'Keefe?
So I knew John O'Keefe, but not well. I had only met him 2 times prior to that night, but I knew him to be a Boston cop, and I knew of him, and I knew some things about him.
As far as the Boston Police Department, it's a fairly large department. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
About how many members or how many people are on Boston?
Depending on the year, sometimes it's upwards of 2,000.
Through the course of your work over the decades that you worked with the Boston Police, did you ever work with or have any professional sort of interaction?
No, I don't remember working with him directly within the Boston Police Department.
Were you aware of sort of
Yes, I knew where he worked.
where did you?
I believe he worked at the SORI unit, which is the sex offender registry unit.
You mentioned just briefly before that you had heard of him, correct?
Yes.
What is it that you had heard?
I knew him to be a friend of my sister-in-law, Jen, and her husband, Matt. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Chris, and my sister-in-law, Julie. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Kevin's. I've heard his name mentioned multiple times. I knew that he had a horrible couple tragedies in his family. I knew that he stepped up and decided to take care of his niece and his nephew when they tragically lost their parents.
How would you describe,
Although I didn't know him, I considered him to be a friend, and our relationship was very good, cordial. I considered him to be somebody that I could hang out with and have a good time with.
you mentioned that Mr. O'Keefe walked in around 11, and it just for clarity purposes, you're referring to Karen Read, is that correct?
Yes,
Do you see Ms. Read in the courtroom today?
yes, I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or not?
Sure, she's a female at the table in front of me with a black top on, long sleeve.
Just identification.
Yes.
With regard to Ms. Read, had you met Ms. Read prior to that date of January 28th?
I believe I had met her one time a week prior.
Do you recall any specifics about that meeting or how it is that you came to meet her about a week prior?
I do.
If you could explain to the jury what those circumstances.
Sure. I met her at the hillside. I believe she was there with John a week prior.
As far as your interaction with her on that particular evening, anything significant stand out to you?
No.
When they came in, and by they, I'm sorry, I mean Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed came into the waterfall, where did they go in relation to where you were sort of situated at the high?
I don't remember them actually walking in the front door. I remember them being in my general area at some point. And they went towards the other side of the table where my sister-in-law, Jen, and my brother-in-law, Matt, were standing.
At some point, did either or both of them make their way towards your side of the table, your side of it, and what, if any, interaction?
Yes, I remember having an interaction or more than one interaction with John. Came over to say hello, and we had some conversation, not for too long, but yes.
Anything specific about that conversation or anything?
No, I think we were talking mostly about work. I think he let me know that the sergeant, I guess, that worked in his unit was leaving, left or transferred. And he was jokingly saying that I should try to get a job over it where he works.
As far as the defendant, Ms. Reed's conversation,
I don't remember having any interaction with her whatsoever.
as far as when Mr. O'Keefe came over, observe as far as what he was wearing, clothing, anything like that?
I don't really remember what he was wearing for clothing. I believe he had a baseball hat on. Other than that, I can't remember his clothing.
Specifically, do you recall anything as far as like a winter coat or anything like that?
I can't say. I wasn't really paying attention to what he was wearing. I don't know.
As far as just his general features, as far as what you could observe, what, if any, sort of injuries or anything did you observe on his person at that time?
I observed no injuries at that time.
Over the course of the evening, you had a couple of interactions with Mr. O'Keefe, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe we talked a few times, hung out, stood next to each other for a while, like you normally would do at a bar restaurant.
Is the band playing while this is going on, is that correct?
Yes, the band was there. I believe they took a break here and there, but they were there for the night.
How would you describe the general mood or demeanor of the group?
In one word, it would be fun. Everybody was in a great mood. People were getting along. It was friends and family, and it was just seemed like a great night.
Do you recall about what time started to wind down? Or
I believe the band stopped playing probably close to 12. Things started winding down a little before 12.
from the group that you just described at the high top table, what was the order in which people left the establishment, starting with the first?
So I believe the first to leave was myself, my wife, Nicole, my daughter, Caitlin, and Brian Higgins left at that time as well.
Had anybody left from your group prior to when the bar starts to wind down around 12, correct?
Yes.
Prior to the bar winding down, had anybody from your group left before that?
I didn't remember or notice that. I'm not sure.
So the first to leave from your group when the bar is winding down is yourself, Mr. Higgins, your wife, and your daughter.
Yes.
When you exit the establishment, where do you go?
Into the parking lot to my vehicle.
Let me take it back just for a moment, back into the waterfall. During the course of the evening, what, if any, conversation was had by you or amongst the group that you observed as far as where to go next, or what were you doing following?
So there was some conversation relative to going to my brother's sub shop, which is across the street, and he was maybe going to make some pizzas for people if they were hungry. So that was discussed.
And did that end up?
No, some people didn't want to go over there, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen.
Beyond that, was there anything else that was discussed as far as, and what was that?
So it ended up being my son Brian's 23rd birthday. So at 12 o'clock, he would be 23. There was some discussion about if anybody wanted to go by the house to say happy birthday to him. I know my wife, Nicole, mentioned it to Jen and Matt, and it was said, I believe, in the group where we were standing.
So was that sort of an open invitation that was extended to,
Yeah, sure. Anybody that was there was welcome to come by if they wanted to.
as far as you knew, as far as who from the group were you aware of?
I don't really remember the responses. I don't think I knew for sure if anybody was going to come, except Brian Higgins said he would come by.
You left around.
Yes.
Had Brian Higgins been to your house before?
I believe he was at my house for a high school graduation party.
High school graduation, probably in the spring, is that correct?
It would have been the summer prior to that time. So my twins were graduating high school and we had something at the house, and it was spring, summer of the year prior.
And around that time, so that would have been 2021, is that correct?
Yes.
So around that time, there was still messages or whatever of the COVID pandemic, is that correct?
Yes, actually, that was just getting over, I think.
And so where was this graduation party at your house? Was that inside your house or outside your house or something?
It was actually out back. It was more of a cookout type thing.
As far as you can recall, prior to January 28, 2000, had Mr. Higgins been physically inside your house for anything beyond using the bathroom?
Besides that graduation party, I don't believe he had ever been at my house. I'm sure he walked into the house to use the bathroom or something that day, but I didn't really notice.
We call ourselves Boricua, a unique name honoring the vibrant spirit of our people. When you experience our island, you'll find that spirit in your live, Boricua.
Left the house?
Yes.
And nobody else arrived at the house.
Your sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, at some point, did they come by?
Yes, I thought you were referring to after they showed up.
So when, my question is, do you know whether or not when Jennifer McCabe and Matthew McCabe arrived, was Colin still there?
I don't know if he was still there or not. I believe he left before they came, but I'm not 100%.
So you come home and you go to use the restroom, is that correct?
Yes,
When you go to use the restroom, Colin's there, correct?
yes,
And the McCabe's are not?
they are not.
When you come back from the restroom, Colin's not there?
Yes, Colin was gone.
And the McCabe's are there?
No, I don't believe they had arrived yet.
So they arrived sometime after Colin had left.
Yes.
Over the course of that evening of the 28th into the early morning of the 29th, did anybody else come into your house, or did anybody else come into your house at any point?
No,
In addition to yourself, your wife, and your son, did you have any pets at that time?
yeah, yes, we did.
What kind of pets did you have?
We had a dog.
What kind of dog was that?
So it was a German Shepherd mix,
What was the name of the dog?
Chloe.
And how long had you and your family had?
We had Chloe for approximately, at that time, maybe 6 or 7 years.
Do you recall how you got the dog or where you got
The dog was from a shelter in Dallas, Texas, actually.
essentially a rescue dog? Is that correct?
Yes, rescue dog.
When you got home after you,
At some point, I went upstairs to grab the dog and let her out back to use the bathroom.
so when you would take the dog out, or when anybody would take the dog out to use the bathroom, how would that be accomplished? So what I'm asking is, would the dog be on a leash, or would it be let out in the yard?
So the backyard's fenced in, so I would open up the back door and she can go out, use the bathroom, and come back inside.
The entirety of your backyard, that's a fenced-in backyard, is that correct?
Yes.
Beyond that fence, as far as the abutting, what sort of abuts the back of your?
Behind the back fence, there's a railroad track. I believe it's a commuter rail that's behind the fence.
And is there any sort of opening or way to get into any wooded area between your house and the tracks?
Yes, there's a gate back there.
The gate, as far as when you let the dog out in the back that night, did you stay with the dog while the dog was outside?
I stayed at the doorway when the dog went to the bathroom and then ran right back in.
So about how long was the dog outside?
She was out back for maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Went outside, went to the bathroom, came back. When the dog came back inside the house, where did the dog go?
So the dog walked around in the kitchen for a few minutes and then I took her upstairs.
And when you took her upstairs, where upstairs?
The dog liked to sleep in our room, mine and my wife's room. A lot of times she would go up there on her own. Sometimes I would walk her up and I walked her up to our bedroom.
And at any point in time for the remainder of that evening or the early morning?
No.
You mentioned that there are tracks that run close to your property, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that just the commuter rail, or does the Acela go by, or anything else?
I believe there is, in addition to the commuter rail, there's other trains that use that track, yes.
How often, daily basis, do
It depends on schedule-wise, if it's the middle of the week or if it's the weekend. But on any given day, they can go by 5 or 6 times, morning, more towards the rush hour times, morning, at night, and then sometimes at night and sometimes during the day. Really all day and night.
when the trains go by, about how loud is it?
It's loud, although having lived there for a period of time, I feel like at least I'm immune to the sound. I don't really hear it as much anymore.
So something essentially based on how long you've lived there, you really don't even hear it anymore?
Not really, no.
You let the dog out, you bring the dog back upstairs, and then where did you go?
So after I brought the dog up, I just came back down and hung out with everybody else.
Where within your house?
So everybody was in the kitchen, and then we have a connecting dining room, but it's opened. It's only a difference of 5 feet. And then we have the family room den that's adjacent to the kitchen, but they're all close proximity.
The kitchen and the dining room are the same room, is that correct?
Yes.
As far as what if anything is between the kitchen and dining room and the living room?
So there's a wall, but there's a doorway. So there's really no barrier to go from the kitchen dining room into the family room.
So if somebody's standing in the family room and somebody's standing in the kitchen dining area, they can sort of see each other?
Yes.
In the kitchen area where everybody was, or in the kitchen dining room area, do you recall where people were and what they were doing around that time?
Yeah, I think people were just sitting around having drinks. Someone had a speaker and they were listening to music and just talking and hanging out.
As far as the sort of group, sort of the overall mood or demeanor of the group back at the house, how would you?
Pleasant, fun. Everybody was having a good time. We were wishing Brian a happy birthday and everything was going great.
At any point in time while this was all going on, did you, other than your situation with the dog, was there any point in time where you were not with the group in the kitchen dining area?
No, I was there basically for the whole night, except I think at one point I may have shown Brian Higgins some photos that were in my son's room that were upstairs. My son, Jack, who's one of the twins, was in the Marines or is in the Marines. We had put some plaques and some stuff in his room upstairs. Brian Higgins was prior military, as am I. And I thought he would want to see the photos, so I had him look at them.
And that period of time that you were outside of the kitchen dining room, Higgins, about
Very quickly, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes.
now, at some point over the course of that morning, things started to.
Yes.
About what time was that things started to wind down? People started to.
I think Brian left at around 1:30. I believe he was the first to leave, and then others left after that.
You say others left after that. After Mr. Higgins left your house, where did you?
So after Brian left, I had gone upstairs and hung out and watched TV up in my bedroom.
Had a long day that.
Yes, I had the funeral in New York that morning. We had the long drive back, and we had been out, and now we're hanging out at my house, and it had been a long day, yes.
So at any point in time, after you went upstairs, after Mr. Higgins left upstairs at all?
Yes, I think I popped back down at one point just to see how long people were going to be there, and then went back up.
When you popped back down, how many people were?
I think Jen and Matt was still there, and Brian's two friends were still there, my daughter Caitlin.
As far as beyond Mr. Higgins, was there any other occasion that you can recall where somebody from your house went outside and then came back?
Yes. So while we were hanging out, I believe the girl Julie Nagel's brother came to the house. I never saw him, but I could hear them saying that he was out front. And I think Julie Nagel had walked outside to talk to him.
At some point after she walked outside, she came back inside, is that correct?
Yes.
About how long a period of time, if you know, was she outside?
I didn't really pay attention to how long it was. I don't think it was that long.
As far as the outside of your house, after you had let Chloe out and back in, what, if any, observations did you make outside of your house? Did you look out? Did you see anything outside of the house?
Just that we have windows in the back of the kitchen area. You could just see that it was snowing.
Is that sort of like a bay window in the kitchen?
Yes, it's a large bay window in the kitchen.
When you look out the bay window in the kitchen, what part of your property does that face?
It's the backyard. You can see the backyard. The bulkhead is right under that bay window, and you can pretty much have a view of the whole backyard if it's in the daytime, but it was obviously a little dark.
See the front of the house at any part of the front of the house when you're looking out the bay window?
No.
But any point in time over the course of the evening, did you look out front to see anything out in front of your house?
No.
At any point in time over the course of the evening, did you hear anything from front of the house, the back of the house, anywhere around the house that drew your attention outside?
No.
At any point in time during the evening, did you know or did you become aware of either John O'Keefe or the defendant Karen Read coming over to your house? At no point in time over the course of that evening or the early morning there, did John O'Keefe or Karen Read physically come into your house?
John O'Keefe and Karen Read never entered my house.
So you go up to bed and the group is still downstairs, is that correct?
Yes.
At some point, your wife Nicole, who you share a bedroom with, did she come upstairs?
Yes.
Do you know about what time that was?
It was probably 2-ish. Not exactly sure, but around 2 or 2 o'clock.
The doors to your house is, as far as the front doors and the back doors, what is the situation with regard to locking the doors before everybody goes to bed?
Rephrase that.
You lived at 34 Fairview Road. There were a number of doors to the house, including 2 doors in the front, correct?
Yes.
How is that? Let me ask you this. Would it be unusual for the front doors of your house to remain unlocked?
No.
Is that something that happened on occasion where people were supposed to lock the doors, but
Yes, from time to time, the doors, people would just forget to lock them, or we just didn't lock them.
so your wife comes up to your bedroom about 2 a.m. or so. As far as you knew, was everybody else had left the house at that point?
Yes,
You're up for a period of time with your wife, is that correct?
yes.
Over the course of that time, so following 2 o'clock in the morning, do you recall any sort of phone call or phone conversation with Mr. Higgins or anybody else?
No,
At some point you fall asleep, do you recall about when that was?
I don't, but it was obviously after 2 because that's when she came upstairs, watched TV and hung out together for a while and then went to sleep.
The dog, Chloe, was she up in the room where you
Yes.
was there overnight, is that correct?
Yes,
Turning your attention to later on that morning, beginning of that morning, daytime morning, January 20th. Obviously, at some point you wake up, correct?
yes.
What is it that wakes you up on that morning?
I was awoken that morning to my sister-in-law, Jen, had burst into my room.
Do you know about what time that was?
It was early in the morning, between 6 and 6:30, I would say.
Fair to say that's not a,
No,
when she burst into your room, can you describe her demeanor or how she appeared when she first,
she was very upset, almost hysterical.
what if anything did she say when she came into the
She said something to the effect, John is dead.
Next question, please.
Did you know who she was referring to when she initially comes in?
I initially did not.
And at some point during the course of that conversation, does Ms. McCabe make reference to going down?
Yes,
Prior to that, not the content of the conversation, but as far as the length of the conversation. About how long was that length of the conversation that occurred in your bedroom between yourself, Ms. McCabe, and your wife?
probably a minute.
The demeanor that you described as far as Ms. McCabe was concerned is almost hysterical. Was that continuous throughout that initial conversation?
Yes, she was very upset.
If anyone did she indicate was downstairs, or why did you go downstairs?
She said that the police.
This I'm going to allow.
Go ahead.
She said that the police were downstairs.
So you went downstairs to talk to the,
Yes,
when you go downstairs, what do you see when you get to the bottom?
I saw a Canton police officer downstairs.
So inside your house,
Yes,
the door to your house, was it still open or shut or something?
I don't remember.
The Canton police officer that's inside your home, did you recognize him?
Yes,
Who did you recognize?
the last name Lank, so Officer Lank.
Was he someone that you were familiar with?
I knew who he was. Yes,
Did you socialize or friends or anything like that?
I didn't socialize with him. I knew him to be a Canton police officer. I had met him, multiple times, and I knew him to know my brother Chris.
So knew him is essentially what I'm asking, knew him in a professional capacity, personal capacity?
A quality replacement window made with Fibrix material, which is twice as strong as vinyl, delivered through a stress-free process. Welcome to Renewal by Andersen. Get the peace of mind knowing Renewal by Andersen handles everything from start to finish. With one call, you'll enjoy working with the best people, exclusive products, and a superior process.
It's the people.
It's the process.
It's the product.
Call now to get our exceptional signature service. This fantastic offer is available only for a limited time. Renewal by Andersen.
No, of course they were welcome in my house.
Where did you go with the officers in your house? Where did you spoke with the officer, I'm presuming?
Yes, we spoke in the kitchen area.
And when you're speaking with the officer in the kitchen area, who is there?
So my wife, Nicole, her sister, Jen, and I believe Jen's husband, Matt, arrived almost the same time that I came downstairs, maybe a minute after.
And how long a period of time was this conversation that occurred in the kitchen?
I don't remember the exact time. I wouldn't want to guess. I don't remember. He was 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe initially.
When you say initially, was there a subsequent conversation that occurred after that?
Yes, Officer Lank returned to the house sometime after that.
When he returned sometime after that, was he alone or
I believe that time he was with Lieutenant Gallagher, perhaps.
were you familiar with Lieutenant Gallagher prior to that one?
I knew who Lieutenant Gallagher was on a professional level. I had not hung out with him on a social level.
And again, they were welcomed into your home and you spoke with them, is that correct?
Yes, the second time they were there, they were invited back to the house via a phone call.
The conversation within your house, where did that,
Same area, family room, kitchen area.
if you know about how long the conversation was? that second come back to the house?
That may have been longer, maybe a half hour.
Going back to that initial conversation, as far as, so it's yourself, it's Mr. and Mrs. McCabe, your wife, and then the police, is that correct?
Myself, my wife Nicole, my sister-in-law Jen, her husband Matt had arrived, and the police, yes.
In between that first speaking with the police and the second time that the police came back to your house, if anyone did you call or notify in regard to the situation that was going on in front of you?
I called Brian Higgins
Why did you call?
because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and that what had happened.
As far as you knew with reference to Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, what, if any, relationship, friendship, anything were you aware of between Mr. Higgins and either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms.
I was not aware too much about a relationship with Brian and either person. Brian had mentioned maybe even that night that he was friendly and knew John. I knew of no relationship between Brian and the defendant.
Following your conversation with Mr. Higgins, if anyone else came up?
Brian Higgins eventually came over to my house, and my sister-in-law Julie also arrived at my house.
Do you know why your sister-in-law Julie came by here?
Yes.
Why?
She has a routine that when it's someone's birthday, she likes to come by and bring coffee and donuts. So it was Brian's birthday that night. So my sister-in-law Julie was coming by to drop off some donuts and coffee, I think.
Where was Julie? I saw her.
She was out front in the driveway.
What, if anything, did you ask Julie to do when you saw her out?
I asked her to come inside.
When she came inside, is that when you informed her of what had happened?
Yes, I don't know if it was necessarily me that informed her, but people that were there were explaining to her what happened. It was a very chaotic, unbelievably chaotic morning.
As far as when that was described to your sister-in-law Julie, how would you describe her demeanor or her reaction to the news regarding Mr. O'Keefe?
Shock. That's how I would describe it. Everybody's reaction that morning was utter shock. She was upset and looked very in shock.
So the second time that the Canton police officers come back to your home, who was there at that point?
I know I was there for sure. My wife, Nicole, Jen, her husband, Matt. Brian Higgins may have been there at that time. And I'm not sure about Julie. Julie at one point left the house, and I think she came back later in the morning, but so I'm not sure if she was there.
At some point when your sister-in-law Julie came back to your house, who, if anyone, came to your house?
Her husband, my brother Chris, who's her husband.
Was this before or after the second time that the police had been at your house?
I believe they came back after the second time, but I'm not 100% sure. The first time that Julie came with the coffee, the police were not there.
When you first get up, you come downstairs and the police they're basically in your doorway, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you see outside as far as what was going on outside at that time?
Not from downstairs, but I had looked out the window after Jen had come up into my room and explained what had happened and before I went downstairs.
When you looked out your window from your bed, what did you see?
I could see at least one police vehicle. I could see that there was something going on out front, and that was about it. I just went straight downstairs.
At that time that you looked out your window, either an ambulance?
I don't remember if I saw an ambulance. There were emergency vehicles out there, but I can't remember exactly which types.
And at any point in time, at that time or subsequent throughout the course of the day, did you go out to that area of your yard where you saw the cruisers and the sort of light?
No,
And why?
I didn't see that there was a reason to go out to that area. The police had already been in my house. They had already talked to us about what was going on. It was a snowstorm at that point. They were trying to conduct an investigation, and I didn't want to interfere with it or have anything to do with it.
As far as what you're learning when Jennifer McCabe first comes surging into your bedroom at 6 to 6:30 in the morning, at any point around there were you made aware of where John O'Keefe was at that point?
Yes,
What were you made aware of?
I was made aware that he was taken to the hospital.
By the time that you're awoken by Mrs. McCabe, John O'Keefe is, to your knowledge, not outside.
To my knowledge, I believed he was on the way to the hospital.
Later on in the course of that day, at some point, did you have occasion to speak with some troopers from the state police?
Yes,
If you recall, who is it that you spoke with?
I spoke with Trooper, last name Proctor, and then another trooper, and I don't know the last name, first name Yuri.
Would it be Sergeant?
It could be.
Had you met either of those troopers prior to that date?
I had never met Trooper Proctor. I had met Trooper, I forget, what is the last name?
You met Trooper
Yuri.
Yuri.
I had met him once or twice before.
Was that in a professional capacity?
Yes,
Where did you speak with him on that?
at my sister-in-law Jen's house.
If you recall, about what time of day was it that you spoke with him?
It was late morning, early afternoon. the day of the incident. So I don't know the exact time. Before noon, I think.
Why was it?
My sister-in-law, Jen, and her husband, Matt, were leaving my house. My sister-in-law was distraught. I wanted to be comforting to them and be there for them if they needed anything. I drove to their house.
This is, and speaking of your sister-in-law, Jennifer, this is someone you've known since she was how old?
7 years old. She's like a little sister to me.
At the point that you're going over to the house, did you know that there were going to be troopers from the state police over at the house?
Yes.
And fair to say they asked to talk to you, is that correct?
Yes.
Who, if anyone else, they spoke to at your sister-in-law's house that day?
I believe they spoke with Jen, my sister-in-law, Jen, and then her husband, Matt, and then myself.
So was that done in a group setting or was it separate or something?
Separate.
So they spoke to you in one area of the house while Jennifer and Matthew McCabe were in another area of the house and vice versa for you?
Yes, I spoke with them at the dining room table, and Jen and Matt were not present. I believe they may have been upstairs or somewhere else in the house.
Where were you when the troopers were talking to either Jennifer McCabe or?
I was upstairs when they were being spoken to.
I may have one moment, Joe.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a series of 8 photographs from that group. What I've just presented you with been previously marked as exhibits 58 through 65, and generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
What do you recognize?
The photos appear to be the front yard in front of my old house at 34 Fairview Road.
From those photographs, they appear to be a fair and accurate portrayal of what your house and your yard looked like around that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury to discuss with the witness briefs. Mr. Albert, sir, there should be on the desk in front of you a laser pointer. Actually, we already talked.
I have that, yes.
What's up on the screen currently? Do you recognize, is that what's depicted in exhibit?
Yes, this looks like the photo exhibit 58 that you handed me.
This is a photograph of your house, or if I'm standing on the street to the left side of the property, correct?
Yes.
On this left side of your property, let me ask you this first. As far as between the roadway of Fairview Road and your front lawn, is there anything there as far as a sidewalk or anything like that?
No, there's no sidewalk. So the grass area goes right to the curb, and then there's the street.
The curb that's in between the grass and the roadway, is that like a straight curb, a straight edge curb, granite curbing, or like rounded curbing? How would you describe it?
I would just describe it as a regular curbing. It's not granite. The color is black, so it seems like a tar curbing.
In this area of the left side of your property, what if anything of note is in that area of the property?
Well, in that area of the property, first of all, that's basically the property line from the neighbor's house. If you're staring at my house from the front, the neighbor to the left, that's the property line area. But there's a fire hydrant there. There is a flagpole with the American flag and the Marine Corps flag. There is we call it like an electrical box, but I'm not sure what the purpose of it is.
So for all the years that you've lived there, I really don't know what that electric.
I don't know if it's operable. Sometimes the door is open. If it's windy, the door of the box blows open, and sometimes it's closed, and we don't really have much to do with it.
The general area where you saw police vehicles, do you see that in this photograph?
Yes, that's the same general area.
Same general area as you were describing with the fire hydrant.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit 59. Again, sir, what's up on the screen? Is that what you have before you?
What was it, 59? Yes.
From this photograph, sir, this is again a picture of your residence around the time of January 29th, correct?
Yes.
Fair to say this is taken after some of the snow has melted from the storm before.
Yes, it appears that there's less snow in the front there.
So less snow than what you saw when you looked out your window or at some later point.
Yes.
From this photograph, if you could just direct the jury's attention to the driveway and the garages, where is that located?
My driveway was this area right here, and that's the garage doors.
From within this photograph as well, you mentioned that there were sort of 2 doors to the front of your house, one that leads into a foyer area and the other leads into a living room of some kind. If you could direct the jury's attention to where each of those doors would be on that.
Sure. So the door right here we consider it the front door. That goes into a foyer area. And not from this photo, you can't really see it, but there's a door in this breezeway area, and that opens up into the family room.
One last thing from this photograph, sir, if the window, that window in this photograph as well.
Yes, I believe it would be this one right here in the corner.
If I could have the next exhibit number 6.
You say 60?
60. So what's up on the screen? Do you recognize that as what you have before you as exhibit 60?
Yes.
And From this photograph, as far as the roadway and the sort of width of the road from the curb to the line there, is that generally what it was on January 29th? That's what the roadway looked like?
The morning of the 29th.
The morning of the 29th, it was snowing, correct?
So the roadway, I believe, would have had some snow on it.
What I'm asking is, when you came home that evening or the early morning, is that essentially what the roadway looked like, absent whatever the snow was covered?
Yes.
The next photograph, Ms. Gillen? Again, now looking at what is Exhibit 61, is that correct?
Yes.
This is essentially a closer up image of the area of the fire hydrant, electrical box, and the flagpole that you were talking about before.
Yes.
Ms. Gillen, if I could have the next photograph. Screen, this would be, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Is this 62?
60 appears to be, yes. 60.
So you were mentioning earlier in your testimony that the area where you saw the police cruisers when you looked out your window in the morning of the 29th was near where your property abuts the neighboring property, correct?
Yes.
And do you happen to know what number that next door neighbor's house is, up or down from 30?
I honestly don't. I don't know what number that is.
Do you see the property line in between your house and the next door neighbor?
Yes, I believe that row of trees is the property line.
There's,
Yes, they appear to be in line from almost the street to the white fence.
and that white fence in the back right of that fence that you were talking about before, that's your backyard.
Yes.
The next photograph is coming up. Again, this is just another photograph of sort of that area of your yard. Is that correct?
1 second. Sorry. Yes.
Reference to this area of the yard at your house when you were living there at 34 Fairview Road, is that an area of the yard that would be of particular use, or did you go in that area of the yard all that much?
No, we didn't really use that area too often. There's a large wood chip bed. You can't see it because of the snow, but it covers that area. So we don't really go over that often.
So with reference to area of the yard, was there any sort of overhead, like ambient lighting, street lights, anything like that?
No, so that's a very dark part of the yard. There's no street light there at all.
The next photograph, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, I believe this would be number 4, is that correct?
Yes.
With reference to this, can you describe to the jury, what are we looking at in this particular photograph?
That's the front right door, I guess you could say, to the house. And again, you can't see the door, but it's inside that breezeway area to the left.
If you could, just use the.
Oh, yeah. So the door would be right in here.
From the driveway leading up to that front door area you were talking about with the foyer once you get in, what, if anything, is leading you up to the steps there?
To the other door,
To the other,
there's a brick walkway.
so brick walkway leading up the brick steps into the foyer area of your house.
Yes.
The last in this set, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, this would be number 5. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, sir?
Yes.
What do you recognize?
So that's the picture of the ground in front of the fire hydrant, which is to the left front of my yard.
Mr. Albert, with the days that sort of followed from January 29th, as far as your home was concerned, what, if any, sort of police presence did you observe or notice in that area in the front yard of your home?
So over the course of the next couple of days, there were emergency vehicles and police personnel that day and days following in front of the house.
So later on in the afternoon of the 29th and continuing on for days after, is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather was between the date of the 29th and the days that the police presence was outside of your
I
house?
believe it rained a few times during that time.
As far as the snow that had been piled up on your front lawn, what, if anything, was occurring with the snow as the days went on following the 29th?
I believe, so some of the snow was shoveled out, I believe, during the crime scene, and then some of the snow was just dissipating due to the fact that it was melting and it had rained a bunch of days.
Sir, if I could draw attention to your house, and obviously at some point you moved from the house on Fairview and Canton to Norwood, correct?
Yes.
When was that first discussed between you and your wife as far as selling the house?
That was discussed in October, November of, it would have been 2021.
What was it that sort of precipitated that discussion as far as selling your house?
Around that time, and it was post-COVID, the housing market seemed really good. And my brother, Chris, had sold his house, was in the process and ultimately sold his house around that time. He got a great deal on it. I had known some other people that had sold around that time. It was a little early for us because our children weren't all necessarily gone yet, but it was close and we thought we could get a good deal for the house. So That's when we started exploring it. So he put me in touch with a realtor that ultimately sold his house.
At some point, you sold the house?
I did. So we didn't end up selling until April of 3.
As far as prior to selling the house, what, if any, did the sale of your house have anything to do with what occurred there on January 29th, 2022?
Absolutely not.
Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Jones, rather than cross-examination of Mr. Albert, we're going to let you break for the day. I did want to give you some scheduling updates because there have been questions from you folks and requests. Originally, so next week will be a full week with him, every day next week. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday will be full days. I'd like us to pick up the pace a little bit here, repetitive testimony, so that we can move things along. But we are moving things. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be full days. Tuesdays and Thursday next week will be half days. The week I wanted to address with you, where we were already going to be off the 29th and 31st of that week. There's been a request and it makes sense. We will now take the 29th, 30th, and 31st off rather than have you folks come in. So you'll get 3 full days, maybe in the middle of this trial, to be able to just regroup. And I figured everybody would welcome those days, but I am going to ask you to give us a full day on the 28th. So think about that this weekend. So the Tuesday will be a full day, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you'll be down. June 7th, we're off. We will end June 6th at noon instead of 1 o'clock. All right, so I do have to give you those 3 cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, and read anything about this case, please disregard it. I always like to tell jurors, just leave everything here. Literally, figuratively, just leave it here. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday morning. Any other evidentiary issues I should be prepared to spend some time on this weekend?
Not for the Commonwealth, no.
I heard you say we can wait on that, but I'd like to know, is there anything that I should be taking a look
Right,
at?
no, I wasn't, I was talking about something different. I think with regard to Brian Albert, there's really nothing other than I wanted to talk to my co-counsel over the weekend to get the court to potentially revisit the ruling that you just made, which whether you do or you don't, Your Honor, I think you've heard, we can hear more potential. But with regard to Caitlin Albert, Your Honor, there is the issue of the photos between her and Katie McLaughlin. I just wanted to flag that for the court. I think we've addressed that already, and I think the court had said we'd take them on a photo by photo basis.
No, what I said is you need to approach. So
Yeah.
before she testifies, let me know where we stand.
Will do.
Or before your cross-examination.
Will do.
All right. Do we expect to hear from her next week?
Yes. I think probably not.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right.